Good morning, everyone. How's it going? Third day in a row for Mornings with Mark. Still forgetting not to shake the camera. Still working out that intro. It looks cool on my side. It's not kicking out on the stream. No idea why. Going to tackle that later on today. Made some adjustments to the lighting, made some adjustments to the sound. I think we're doing good here. Thanks for joining again. First couple days we talked about perspectives. Yesterday we dove in a little bit to the Olympic hack and that really cool response from them, basically saying we're not super worried about attribution at the moment. We're going to worry about having the games run smoothly, and then we'll figure it all out after the fact. And that's a really mature response from a security program. But one of the things that I wanted to talk about that we think is mature, that's not really that mature, is how we calculate risk or how we adjust for risk. So we've been talking about perspectives, and that kind of naturally spins along to risk in general. So when you're setting up a security program, or if you're looking at the security of your application or of your organization, what you're going to be doing is a threat assessment, a threat and risk assessment. You want to know how risky things are, right? If I stand up a web server and start taking money from folks in exchange for digital downloads, or I'm order processing, what are my risks? What do I need to compensate for? What do I need to apply security controls around? And that sounds really, really formal, but basically it means you're doing something, someone may attack that, you may have errors, there's a risk there that you can offset or you can accept. So you can either do something about it, so add a security control or maybe double check your code, there's something you can do to mitigate a risk, or you can simply accept it and say, I don't think this is likely to happen and I'm okay if it does, and I'll adjust. Now the way that we do these risk assessments is through a framework. Right? Now, there's a number of frameworks out there. The most popular tends to be the NIST framework, and I'll link to that down low. In Canada, we use the Harmonized Threat Risk Assessment, which is basically modified off the NIST work. And there's a number of others out there. There's ways to model threats and things like that. And they all work relatively well, but they all have a nasty little secret as well. They're basically based on guessing. Now that's a real problem, especially as a forensic scientist, with that scientific mindset that we should be applying. It is computer science after all, it's not computer guessing, that we really should have a lot better data to make these decisions. And that's really the crux of the problem, is that we don't have appropriate data to make proper risk assessments. So what we end up seeing in a risk assessment is that people will essentially rate it, high, medium, low, or they'll pick a number because they feel better and they'll say, this is a 7 out of 10 risk. What the hell does that mean? Really, it's all relatively, it's basically just pulling a number out of somewhere and saying, I think this is, 7 out of 10 likely to happen, or yellow likely to happen. You can't make a decision based on that. So if you look at comparable ways to evaluate risk, you look at the insurance industry. I know we don't like insurance, but if you look at insurance industry, and let's say auto insurance to avoid the whole healthcare debate, but if you look at auto insurance, they have essentially a century's worth of data to make decisions on, so that they know in a busy city, so let's say in Chicago, that a female driver, 28 to 32 in the western part of the city is, this likely to have an accident, or is this likely to have their car vandalized or broken into. And that's based on empirical data. It's based on quantitative data. And that makes a completely different risk decision when you actually have data to back it up, as opposed to yellow risk. They actually have a number and they say, out of every 365 days, we see 32 different crimes in this area, or 32 insurance claims over the course of the last 50 years. So it's really solid data to make a risk prediction. When it comes to cybersecurity, we don't have the data. And that's really the main problem. We don't have the data, and there's no easy way for you to contextualize your issue. So if we tie back to yesterday's talk about the Olympics, you look at that and you go, okay, how are they making risk decisions? Well, they're essentially assuming 100% guaranteed that they are going to be attacked by persistent attackers who are relentless. Gotta get my tea going. That are absolutely relentless. And in their case, they're almost always proved correct. So that's good. They have, and then they use year after year, or every 2 years for the Olympics, they use the data from the last Olympics as a start around the risk assessment for the next one, and saying, well, we saw 100,000 attacks, or attempts to breach the perimeter. Here's what we're going to assume for next time. So they're actually using their own data and learning year over year, and that's not bad, but they're not including the overall global data, because we don't have great global data. Now, companies like the one I work for, like all the security companies out there, are trying desperately to get this data. But it's not any one thing that one company can solve. or any one organization can solve. It's really a matter of collaboration across the community and realization that there's not competition in this respect, is that we need better data around not just attacks, but responses to attacks, preparations by organizations. We can't make the proper risk assessments right now because we simply don't have the quantitative data to back them up. Until we get that, it's going to be guessing. It's going to be red, yellow, green risk. Now, that's not to say you shouldn't start or shouldn't keep doing risk assessments. In fact, we need to reevaluate how we do risk assessments, not just on the data side, but there's this tendency of doing a risk assessment sort of once every year or once every X number of months. You need to continually assess risk. It needs to be in your CI/CD pipeline, your continuous integration, continuous deployment pipeline, simply because you're making changes all the time. And as soon as you make a change, you may or may not be opening yourself up to new risks. So that's really a key thing. And that's kind of some of the stuff I'm diving into today. That was bubbled up from, I do obviously, based on my work line, I'm doing a lot of work in the cloud. And I was looking at AWS's fantastic, well-architected framework set of best practices, white papers, really just a good framework for deploying things in the AWS cloud effectively. And one of the things they had, obviously, security and reliability is a pillar. Security is a pillar, reliability is a pillar. And they were talking about this, but there's no integrated way of deploying or doing continual risk assessments, of evaluating the impact of the changes. What is the potential opening up of making these code changes? And I think that applies not just to cloud builds, but to everything in general, is that we need to be far more ruthless in our risk assessments, trying to gather that data and be upfront if something is simply an assumption and a guess, and list what those assumptions and guesses are. So that you know and go in there eyes open. Because the only thing about worse than not doing a risk assessment is having a risk assessment and assuming it's quantitative when it's really just somebody's best guess. So you need to be clear about that. That's what I've been thinking about this morning. That's what I'm going to be kind of diving into, I think, throughout the day. What are your thoughts on risk assessments? Let me know. Hit me up in the comments here on Facebook if you're watching live, or on YouTube, or wherever you find this video. I'm always eager to engage in conversation, especially around a topic like this, because I think there's a lot of unfortunate misconceptions and sort of bad perceptions around what risk assessments, the intention are, and how onerous they are. And I think we can do a lot better as a community. As always, or at least as 3 days of now, you can catch me again tomorrow morning around 9:30 Eastern, hitting it live on Facebook, posting the video afterwards to my other channels. You can, almost, I'm learning. Hit me up on Twitter, MarkNCA. Most social networks, you can get me at MarkNCA. Always looking to engage, always looking to help folks out and learn, because security doesn't have to be as hard as it is. Hope you have a great day, builders. We'll talk to you soon.